Exodus chapter 1. These are the sons of Jacob who went with their father to Egypt, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Joseph was already down in Egypt. In all, Jacob had 70 direct descendants. In this time, Joseph and each of his brothers died, ending that generation. But their descendants had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so quickly that they soon filled the land. Then a new king came to the throne of Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He told his people,
"These Israelites are becoming a threat to us because there are so many of them. We must find a way to put an end to this. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country."
So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves and put brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down under heavy burdens. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more quickly the Israelites multiplied. The Egyptians soon became alarmed and decided to make their slavery more bitter still. They were ruthless with the Israelites, forcing them to make bricks and mortar and to work long hours in the fields. Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah.
"When you help the Hebrew women give birth, kill all the boys as soon as they're born. Allow only the baby girls to live."
But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king and allowed the boys to live too. Then the king called for the midwives.
"Why have you done this?"
He demanded.
"Why have you allowed the boys to live?"
"Sir,"
they told him,
"the Hebrew women are very strong. They have their babies so quickly that we cannot get there in time. They are not slow in giving birth like Egyptian women."
So God blessed the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply, growing more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people:
"Throw all the newborn Israelite boys into the Nile River, but you may spare the baby girls."
Chapter 2. During this time, a man and a woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw what a beautiful baby he was and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a little basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the edge of the Nile River. The baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. Soon after this, one of Pharaoh's daughters came down to bathe in the river, and her servant girls walked along the riverbank. When the princess saw the little basket among the reeds, she told one of her servant girls to get it for her. As the princess opened it, she found the baby boy. His helpless cries touched her heart.
"He must be one of the Hebrew children,"
she said. Then the baby's sister approached the princess.
"Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?"
she asked.
"Yes, do."
The princess replied. So the girl rushed home and called the baby's mother.
"Take this child home and nurse him for me.
The princess told her.
I will pay you for your help."
So the baby's mother took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when he was older, the child's mother brought him back to the princess, who adopted him as her son. The princess named him Moses, for she said,
"I drew him out of the water."
Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his people, the Israelites, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of the Hebrew slaves. After looking around to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The next day, as Moses was out visiting his people again, he saw 2 Hebrew men fighting.
"What are you doing, hitting your neighbor like that?"
Moses said to the one in the wrong.
"Who do you think you are?"
The man replied.
"Who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Do you plan to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?"
Moses was badly frightened because he realized that everyone knew what he had done. And sure enough, when Pharaoh heard about it, he gave orders to have Moses arrested and killed. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and escaped to the land of Midian. When Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. Now it happened that the priest of Midian had 7 daughters who came regularly to this well to draw water and fill the water troughs for their father's flocks. But other shepherds would often come and chase the girls and their flocks away. This time, however, Moses came to their aid, rescuing the girls from the shepherds. Then he helped them draw water for their flocks. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked,
How did you get the flocks watered so quickly today?
An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds.
They told him.
And then he drew water for us and watered our flocks.
Well, where is he then?
Their father asked.
Did you just leave him there? Go and invite him home for a meal.
Moses was happy to accept the invitation, and he settled down to live with them. In time, Reuel gave Moses one of his daughters, Zipporah, to be his wife. Later they had a baby boy, and Moses named him Gershom, for he said,
I have been a stranger in a foreign land.
Years passed, and the king of Egypt died. But the Israelites still groaned beneath their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their pleas for deliverance rose up to God. God heard their cries, and remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the Israelites and felt deep concern for their welfare. Chapter 3. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he went deep into the wilderness near Sinai, the mountain of God. Suddenly, the angel of the Lord appeared to him as a blazing fire in a bush. Moses was amazed, because the bush was engulfed in flames, but it didn't burn up.
Amazing!
Moses said to himself.
Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go over to see this.
When the Lord saw that he had caught Moses' attention, God called to him from the bush, Moses, Moses.
Here I am.
Moses replied. Do not come any closer, God told him. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he hid his face in his hands, because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, You can be sure I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries for deliverance from their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come to rescue them from the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own good and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites live. The cries of the people of Israel have reached me, and I have seen how the Egyptians have oppressed them with heavy tasks. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You will lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt.
But who am I to appear before Pharaoh?
Moses asked God.
How can you expect me to lead the Israelites out of Egypt?
Then God told him, I will be with you, and this will serve as proof that I have sent you. When you have brought the Israelites out of Egypt, you will return here to worship God at this very mountain. But Moses protested,
If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they won't believe me. They will ask, Which God are you talking about? What is his name? Then what should I tell them?
God replied, I am the one who always is. Just tell them, I am, has sent me to you. God also said, Tell them, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This will be my name forever. It has always been my name, and it will be used throughout all generations. Now go and call together all the leaders of Israel. Tell them, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me in a burning bush. He said, You can be sure that I am watching over you, and have seen what is happening to you in Egypt. I promise to rescue you from the oppression of the Egyptians. I will lead you to the land now occupied by the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The leaders of the people of Israel will accept your message. Then all of you must go straight to the king of Egypt and tell him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us go on a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go except under heavy pressure. So I will reach out and strike at the heart of Egypt with all kinds of miracles. Then at last he will let you go. I will see to it that the Egyptians treat you well. They will load you down with gifts, so you will not leave empty-handed. The Israelite women will ask for silver and gold jewelry and fine clothing from their Egyptian neighbors and their neighbors' guests. With this clothing you will dress your sons and daughters. In this way you will plunder the Egyptians. Chapter 4. But Moses protested again.
Look, they won't believe me. They won't do what I tell them. They just say, "The Lord never appeared to you."
Then the Lord asked him, "What do you have there in your hand?"
"A shepherd's staff,"
Moses replied. "Throw it down on the ground," the Lord told him. So Moses threw it down, and it became a snake. Moses was terrified, so he turned and ran away. Then the Lord told him, "Take hold of its tail." So Moses reached out and grabbed it, and it became a shepherd's staff again. "Perform this sign, and they will believe you," the Lord told him. "Then they will realize that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, really has appeared to you." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Put your hand inside your robe." Moses did so, and when he took it out again, his hand was white as snow with leprosy. "Now put your hand back into your robe again," the Lord said. Moses did, and when he took it out this time, it was as healthy as the rest of his body. "If they do not believe the first miraculous sign, they will believe the second," the Lord said. "And if they do not believe you even after these 2 signs, then take some water from the Nile River and pour it out on the dry ground. When you do, it will turn into blood." But Moses pleaded with the Lord,
"O Lord, I'm just not a good speaker. I never have been, and I'm not now, even after you have spoken to me. I'm clumsy with words."
"Who makes mouths?" the Lord asked him. "Who makes people so they can speak or not speak, hear or not hear, see or not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go and do as I have told you. I will help you speak well, and I will tell you what to say." But Moses again pleaded,
"Lord, please, send someone else."
Then the Lord became angry with Moses. "All right," he said. "What about your brother Aaron, the Levite? He is a good speaker. And look, he is on his way to meet you now. And when he sees you, he will be very glad. You will talk to him, giving him the words to say. I will help both of you to speak clearly, and I will tell you what to do. Aaron will be your spokesman to the people, and you will be as God to him, telling him what to say. And be sure to take your shepherd's staff along, so you can perform the miraculous signs I have shown you." Then Moses went back home and talked it over with Jethro, his father-in-law.
"With your permission,"
Moses said,
"I would like to go back to Egypt to visit my family. I don't even know whether they are still alive."
Go with my blessing.
Jethro replied. Before Moses left Midian, the Lord said to him, "Do not be afraid to return to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and headed back to the land of Egypt. In his hand he carried the staff of God. Then the Lord reminded him, "When you arrive back in Egypt, go to Pharaoh and perform the miracles I have empowered you to do. But I will make him stubborn, so he will not let the people go. Then you will tell him, 'This is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son. I commanded you to let him go, so he could worship me. But since you have refused, be warned. I will kill your firstborn son.'" On the journey when Moses and his family had stopped for the night, the Lord confronted Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah, his wife, took a flint knife and circumcised her son. She threw the foreskin at Moses' feet and said,
"What a blood-smeared bridegroom you are to me."
When she called Moses a blood-smeared bridegroom, she was referring to the circumcision. After that, the Lord left him alone. Now the Lord had said to Aaron, "Go out into the wilderness to meet Moses." So Aaron traveled to the mountain of God, where he found Moses and greeted him warmly. Moses then told Aaron everything the Lord had commanded them to do and say. and he told him about the miraculous signs they were to perform. So Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt and called the leaders of Israel to a meeting. Aaron told them everything the Lord had told Moses, and Moses performed the miraculous signs as they watched. The leaders were soon convinced that the Lord had sent Moses and Aaron, and when they realized that the Lord had seen their misery and was deeply concerned for them, they all bowed their heads and worshipped. Chapter 5. After this presentation to Israel's leaders, Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh. They told him,
This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, for they must go out into the wilderness to hold a religious festival in my honor.
Is that so?
retorted Pharaoh.
And who is the Lord that I should listen to him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go.
But Aaron and Moses persisted.
The God of the Hebrews has met with us.
They declared,
Let us take a 3-day trip into the wilderness, so we can offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. If we don't, we will surely die by disease or the sword.
Who do you think you are?
Pharaoh shouted.
Distracting the people from their tasks. Get back to work. Look, there are many people here in Egypt, and you are stopping them from doing their work.
That same day, Pharaoh sent this order to the slave drivers and foremen he had set over the people of Israel.
Do not supply the people with any more straw for making bricks. Let them get it themselves. But don't reduce their production quotas by a single brick. They obviously don't have enough to do. If they did, they wouldn't be talking about going into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to their God. Load them down with more work. Make them sweat. That will teach them to listen to these liars.
So the slave drivers and foremen informed the people,
Pharaoh has ordered us not to provide straw for you. Go and get it yourselves. Find it wherever you can. But you must produce just as many bricks as before.
So the people scattered throughout the land in search of straw. The slave drivers were brutal.
Meet your daily quota of bricks just as you did before,
They demanded. Then they whipped the Israelite foremen in charge of the work crews.
Why haven't you met your quotas either yesterday or today?
They demanded. So the Israelite foreman went to Pharaoh and pleaded with him.
Please don't treat us like this.
They begged.
We are given no straw, but we are still told to make as many bricks as before. We are beaten for something that isn't our fault. It is the fault of your slave drivers for making such unreasonable demands.
But Pharaoh replied,
You're just lazy. You obviously don't have enough to do. If you did, you wouldn't be saying, let us go, so we can offer sacrifices to the Lord. Now get back to work. No straw will be given to you, but you must still deliver the regular quota of bricks.
Since Pharaoh would not let up on his demands, the Israelite foremen could see that they were in serious trouble. As they left Pharaoh's court, they met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting outside for them. The foreman said to them,
May the Lord judge you for getting us into this terrible situation with Pharaoh and his officials. You have given them an excuse to kill us.
So Moses went back to the Lord and protested,
Why have you mistreated your own people like this, Lord? Why did you send me? Since I gave Pharaoh your message, he has been even more brutal to your people. You have not even begun to rescue them.
Chapter 6. Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, the Lord told Moses. When he feels my powerful hand upon him, he will let the people go. In fact, he will be so anxious to get rid of them that he will force them to leave his land. And God continued, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, though I did not reveal my name, the Lord, to them. And I entered into a solemn covenant with them. Under its terms I swore to give them the land of Canaan, where they were living. You can be sure that I have heard the groans of the people of Israel, who are now slaves to the Egyptians. I have remembered my covenant with them. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will free you from your slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with mighty power and great acts of judgment. I will make you my own special people, and I will be your God. And you will know that I am the Lord your God, who has rescued you from your slavery in Egypt. I will bring you into the land I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It will be your very own property. I am the Lord. So Moses told the people what the Lord had said, but they wouldn't listen any more. They had become too discouraged by the increasing burden of their slavery. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go back to Pharaoh, and tell him to let the people of Israel leave Egypt."
But Lord,
Moses objected.
my own people won't listen to me anymore. How can I expect Pharaoh to listen? I'm no orator.
But the Lord ordered Moses and Aaron to return to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to demand that he let the people of Israel leave Egypt. These are the ancestors of clans from some of Israel's tribes. The descendants of Reuben, Israel's oldest son, included Hanoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. Their descendants became the clans of Reuben. The descendants of Simeon included Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, whose mother was a Canaanite. Their descendants became the clans of Simeon. These are the descendants of Levi, listed according to their family groups. In the first generation were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi, their father, lived to be 137 years old. The descendants of Gershon included Libni and Shimei, each of whom is the ancestor of a clan. The descendants of Kohath included Amram, Ishar, Hebron, and Uziel. Kohath lived to be 133 years old. The descendants of Merari included Malai and Mushai. These are the clans of the Levites listed according to their genealogies. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. Amram lived to be 137 years old. The descendants of Ishar included Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The descendants of Uziel included Mishael, Elzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron married Elisheba, the daughter of Aminadab and sister of Nashon, and she bore him Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. The descendants of Korah included Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. Their descendants became the clans of Korah. Eleazar, son of Aaron, married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the ancestors of the Levite clans listed according to their family groups. The Aaron and Moses named in this list are the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, "Lead all the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt, division by division." They are the ones who went to Pharaoh to ask permission to lead the people from the land of Egypt. At that time the Lord had said to them, "I am the Lord. Give Pharaoh the message I have given you." This is the same Moses who had argued with the Lord, saying,
I can't do it. I'm no orator. Why should Pharaoh listen to me?
Chapter 7. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pay close attention to this. I will make you seem like God to Pharaoh. Your brother Aaron will be your prophet. He will speak for you. Tell Aaron everything I say to you and have him announce it to Pharaoh. He will demand that the people of Israel be allowed to leave Egypt. But I will cause Pharaoh to be stubborn, so I can multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Even then Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you. So I will crush Egypt with a series of disasters, after which I will lead the forces of Israel out with great acts of judgment. When I show the Egyptians my power and force them to let the Israelites go, they will realize that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded them. Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 at the time they made their demands to Pharaoh. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Pharaoh will demand that you show him a miracle to prove that God has sent you. When he makes this demand, say to Aaron, 'Throw down your shepherd's staff, and it will become a snake.'" So Moses and Aaron went to see Pharaoh, and they performed the miracle just as the Lord had told them. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his court, and it became a snake. Then Pharaoh called in his wise men and magicians, and they did the same thing with their secret arts. Their staffs became snakes too, but then Aaron's snakes swallowed up their snakes. Pharaoh's heart, however, remained hard and stubborn. He still refused to listen, just as the Lord had predicted. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh is very stubborn, and he continues to refuse to let the people go. So go to Pharaoh in the morning as he goes down to the river. Stand on the riverbank and meet him there. Be sure to take along the shepherd's staff that turned into a snake. Say to him, 'The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to say, let my people go, so they can worship me in the wilderness. Until now you have refused to listen to him. Now the Lord says, you are going to find out that I am the Lord. "Look, I will hit the water of the Nile with this staff, and the river will turn to blood. The fish in it will die, and the river will stink. The Egyptians will not be able to drink any water from the Nile." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron to point his staff toward the waters of Egypt, all its rivers, canals, marshes, and reservoirs. Everywhere in Egypt the water will turn into blood, even the water stored in wooden bowls and stone pots in the people's homes." So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded them. As Pharaoh and all of his officials watched, Moses raised his staff and hit the water of the Nile. Suddenly, the whole river turned to blood. The fish in the river died, and the water became so foul that the Egyptians couldn't drink it. There was blood everywhere throughout the land of Egypt. But again the magicians of Egypt used their secret arts, and they too turned water into blood. So Pharaoh's heart remained hard and stubborn. He refused to listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had predicted. Pharaoh returned to his palace and put the whole thing out of his mind. Then the Egyptians dug wells along the riverbank to get drinking water, for they couldn't drink from the river. An entire week passed from the time the Lord turned the water of the Nile to blood. Chapter 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh once again and tell him, 'This is what the Lord says. Let my people go so they can worship me. If you refuse, then listen carefully to this. I will send vast hordes of frogs across your entire land, from one border to the other. The Nile River will swarm with them. They will come up out of the river and into your houses, even into your bedrooms and onto your beds. Every home in Egypt will be filled with them. They will fill even your ovens and your kneading bowls. You and your people will be overwhelmed by frogs." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron to point his shepherd's staff toward all the rivers, canals, and marshes of Egypt, so there will be frogs in every corner of the land." Aaron did so, and frogs covered the whole land of Egypt. But the magicians were able to do the same thing with their secret arts. They too caused frogs to come up on the land. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and begged,
Plead with the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people. I will let the people go, so they can offer sacrifices to the Lord.
You set the time.
Moses replied.
Tell me when you want me to pray for you, your officials, and your people. I will pray that you and your houses will be rid of the frogs. Then only the frogs in the Nile River will remain alive.
Do it tomorrow,
Pharaoh said.
All right.
Moses replied.
It will be as you have said. Then you will know that no one is as powerful as the Lord our God. All the frogs will be destroyed, except those in the river.
So Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, and Moses pleaded with the Lord about the frogs he had sent. And the Lord did as Moses had promised. The frogs in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields all died. They were piled into great heaps, and a terrible stench filled the land. But when Pharaoh saw that the frogs were gone, he hardened his heart. He refused to listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had predicted. So the Lord said to Moses, Tell Aaron to strike the dust with his staff. The dust will turn into swarms of gnats throughout the land of Egypt. So Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded them. Suddenly gnats infested the entire land, covering the Egyptians and their animals. All the dust in the land of Egypt turned into gnats. Pharaoh's magicians tried to do the same thing with their secret arts, but this time they failed, and the gnats covered all the people and animals.
This is the finger of God,
the magicians exclaimed to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's heart remained hard and stubborn. He wouldn't listen to them, just as the Lord had predicted. Next, the Lord told Moses, Get up early in the morning and meet Pharaoh as he goes down to the river. Say to him, This is what the Lord says. Let my people go so they can worship me. If you refuse, I will send swarms of flies throughout Egypt. Your homes will be filled with them, and the ground will be covered with them. But it will be very different in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites live. No flies will be found there. Then you will know that I am the Lord, and that I have power even in the heart of your land. I will make a clear distinction between your people and my people. This miraculous sign will happen tomorrow. And the Lord did just as he had said. There were terrible swarms of flies in Pharaoh's palace and in every home in Egypt. The whole country was thrown into chaos by the flies. Pharaoh hastily called from Moses and Aaron.
All right, go ahead and offer sacrifices to your God,
He said.
but do it here in this land. Don't go out into the wilderness.
But Moses replied,
That won't do. The Egyptians would detest the sacrifices that we offer to the Lord our God. If we offer them here where they can see us, they will be sure to stone us. We must take a 3-day trip into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, just as he has commanded us.
All right, go ahead.
Pharaoh replied.
I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but don't go too far away. Now hurry and pray for me.
As soon as I go,
Moses said,
I will ask the Lord to cause the swarms of flies to disappear from you and all your people. But I am warning you, don't change your mind again and refuse to let the people go to sacrifice to the Lord.
So Moses left Pharaoh and asked the Lord to remove all the flies. And the Lord did as Moses asked, and caused the swarms to disappear. Not a single fly remained in the land. But Pharaoh hardened his heart again, and refused to let the people go. Chapter 9. Go back to Pharaoh, the Lord commanded Moses. Tell him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so they can worship me. If you continue to oppress them and refuse to let them go, the Lord will send a deadly plague to destroy your horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep. But the Lord will again make a distinction between the property of the Israelites and that of the Egyptians. Not a single one of Israel's livestock will die. The Lord announced that he would send the plague the very next day, and he did it just as he had said. The next morning all the livestock of the Egyptians began to die. But the Israelites didn't lose a single animal from their flocks and herds. Pharaoh sent officials to see whether it was true that none of the Israelites' animals were dead. But even after he found it to be true, his heart remained stubborn. He still refused to let the people go. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Take soot from a furnace, and have Moses toss it into the sky while Pharaoh watches. It will spread like fine dust over the whole land of Egypt, causing boils to break out on people and animals alike. So they gathered soot from a furnace and went to see Pharaoh. As Pharaoh watched, Moses tossed the soot into the air, and terrible boils broke out on the people and animals throughout Egypt. Even the magicians were unable to stand before Moses, because the boils had broken out on them too. But the Lord made Pharaoh even more stubborn, and he refused to listen, just as the Lord had predicted. Then the Lord said to Moses, Get up early in the morning. Go to Pharaoh and tell him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says, Let my people go, so they can worship me. If you don't, I will send a plague that will really speak to you and your officials and all the Egyptian people. I will prove to you that there is no other God like me in all the earth. I could have killed you all by now. I could have attacked you with a plague that would have wiped you from the face of the earth. But I have let you live for this reason, that you might see my power, and that my fame might spread throughout the earth. But you are still lording it over my people, and you refuse to let them go. So tomorrow at this time I will send a hailstorm worse than any in all of Egypt's history. Quick, order your livestock and servants to come in from the fields. Every person or animal left outside will die beneath the hail. Some of Pharaoh's officials believed what the Lord said. They immediately brought their livestock and servants in from the fields. But those who had no respect for the word of the Lord left them out in the open. Then the Lord said to Moses, Lift your hand toward the sky, and cause the hail to fall throughout Egypt, on the people, the animals, and the crops. So Moses lifted his staff toward the sky, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and lightning struck the earth. The Lord sent a tremendous hailstorm against all the land of Egypt. Never in all the history of Egypt had there been a storm like that, with such severe hail and continuous lightning. It left all of Egypt in ruins. Everything left in the fields was destroyed, people, animals, and crops alike. Even all the trees were destroyed. The only spot in all Egypt without hail that day was the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel lived. Then Pharaoh urgently sent for Moses and Aaron.
I finally admit my fault.
He confessed.
The Lord is right, and my people and I are wrong. please beg the Lord to end this terrifying thunder and hail. I will let you go at once."
All right.
Moses replied.
As soon as I leave the city, I will lift my hands and pray to the Lord. Then the thunder and hail will stop. This will prove to you that the earth belongs to the Lord. But as for you and your officials, I know that you still do not fear the Lord God as you should.
All the flax and barley were destroyed because the barley was ripe and the flax was in bloom. But the wheat and the spelt were not destroyed because they had not yet sprouted from the ground. So Moses left Pharaoh and went out of the city. As he lifted his hands to the Lord, all at once the thunder and hail stopped, and the downpour ceased. When Pharaoh saw this, he and his officials sinned yet again by stubbornly refusing to do as they had promised. Pharaoh refused to let the people leave, just as the Lord had predicted. Chapter 10. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Return to Pharaoh and again make your demands. I have made him and his officials stubborn so I can continue to display my power by performing miraculous signs among them. You will be able to tell wonderful stories to your children and grandchildren about the marvelous things I am doing among the Egyptians to prove that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said,
"This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to submit to me? Let my people go so they can worship me. If you refuse, watch out, for tomorrow I will cover the whole country with locusts. There will be so many that you won't be able to see the ground. They will devour everything that escaped the hailstorm, including all the trees in the fields. They will overrun your palaces and the homes of your officials and all the houses of Egypt. Never in the history of Egypt has there been a plague like this one."
And with that, Moses turned and walked out. The court officials now came to Pharaoh and appealed to him.
"How long will you let these disasters go on? Please let the Israelites go to serve the Lord their God. Don't you realize that Egypt lies in ruins?"
So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh.
"All right, go and serve the Lord your God,"
He said.
"But tell me, just whom do you want to take along?"
"Young and old, all of us will go.
Moses replied.
We will take our sons and daughters and our flocks and herds. We must all join together in a festival to the Lord."
Pharaoh retorted,
"The Lord will certainly need to be with you if you try to take your little ones along. I can see through your wicked intentions. Never! Only the men may go and serve the Lord, for that is what you requested."
And Pharaoh threw them out of the palace. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Raise your hand over the land of Egypt to bring on the locusts. Let them cover the land and eat all the crops still left after the hailstorm." So Moses raised his staff, and the Lord caused an east wind to blow all that day and through the night. When morning arrived, the east wind had brought the locusts, and the locusts swarmed over the land of Egypt from border to border. It was the worst locust plague in Egyptian history, and there has never again been one like it. For the locusts covered the surface of the whole country, making the ground look black. They ate all the plants and all the fruit on the trees that had survived the hailstorm. Not one green thing remained, neither tree nor plant, throughout the land of Egypt. Pharaoh quickly sent for Moses and Aaron.
"I confess my sin against the Lord your God, and against you,"
He said to them.
"Forgive my sin only this once, and plead with the Lord your God to take away this terrible plague."
So Moses left Pharaoh and pleaded with the Lord. The Lord responded by sending a strong west wind that blew the locusts out into the Red Sea. Not a single locust remained in all the land of Egypt. But the Lord made Pharaoh stubborn once again, and he did not let the people go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Lift your hand toward heaven, and a deep and terrifying darkness will descend on the land of Egypt." So Moses lifted his hand toward heaven, and there was deep darkness over the entire land for 3 days. During all that time the people scarcely moved, for they could not see, but there was light as usual where the people of Israel lived. Then Pharaoh called for Moses.
"Go and worship the Lord,"
he said,
"but let your flocks and herds stay here. You can even take your children with you."
"No,"
Moses said.
"We must take our flocks and herds for sacrifices and burnt offerings to the Lord our God. All our property must go with us. Not a hoof can be left behind. We will have to choose our sacrifices for the Lord our God from among these animals. And we won't know which sacrifices he will require until we get there."
So the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart once more, and he would not let them go.
Get out of here!
Pharaoh shouted at Moses.
Don't ever let me see you again! The day you do, you will die!
"Very well,"
Moses replied.
"I will never see you again."
Chapter 11. Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will send just one more disaster on Pharaoh and the land of Egypt. After that, Pharaoh will let you go. In fact, he will be so anxious to get rid of you that he will practically force you to leave the country. Tell all the Israelite men and women to ask their Egyptian neighbors for articles of silver and gold." Now the Lord had caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the people of Israel, and Moses was considered a very great man in the land of Egypt. He was respected by Pharaoh's officials and the Egyptian people alike. So Moses announced to Pharaoh,
"This is what the Lord says. About midnight I will pass through Egypt. All the firstborn sons will die in every family in Egypt, from the oldest son of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the oldest son of his lowliest slave. Even the firstborn of the animals will die. Then a loud wail will be heard throughout the land of Egypt. There has never been such wailing before, and there never will be again. But among the Israelites it will be so peaceful that not even a dog will bark. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites. All the officials of Egypt will come running to me, bowing low. 'Please leave,' they will beg. 'Hurry and take all your followers with you. Only then will I go.'"
Then, burning with anger, Moses left Pharaoh's presence. Now the Lord had told Moses, "Pharaoh will not listen to you, but this will give me the opportunity to do even more mighty miracles in the land of Egypt." Although Moses and Aaron did these miracles in Pharaoh's presence, the Lord hardened his heart, so he wouldn't let the Israelites leave the country. Chapter 12. Now the Lord gave the following instructions to Moses and Aaron while they were still in the land of Egypt. "From now on, this month will be the first month of the year for you. Announce to the whole community that on the 10th day of this month each family must choose a lamb or a young goat for a sacrifice. If a family is too small to eat an entire lamb, let them share the lamb with another family in the neighborhood. Whether or not they share in this way depends on the size of each family and how much they can eat. This animal must be a 1-year-old male, either a sheep or a goat, with no physical defects. Take special care of these lambs until the evening of the 14th day of this first month. Then each family in the community must slaughter its lamb. They are to take some of the lamb's blood and smear it on the top and sides of the door frame of the house where the lamb will be eaten. That evening everyone must eat roast lamb with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. The meat must never be eaten raw or boiled. Roast it all, including the head, legs, and internal organs. Do not leave any of it until the next day. Whatever is not eaten that night must be burned before morning. Wear your traveling clothes as you eat this meal, as though prepared for a long journey. Wear your sandals and carry your walking sticks in your hands. Eat the food quickly, for this is the Lord's Passover. On that night I will pass through the land of Egypt and kill all the firstborn sons and firstborn male animals in the land of Egypt. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord. The blood you have smeared on your doorposts will serve as a sign. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. This plague of death will not touch you when I strike the land of Egypt. You must remember this day forever. Each year you will celebrate it as a special festival to the Lord. For 7 days you may eat only bread made without yeast. On the very first day you must remove every trace of yeast from your homes. Anyone who eats bread made with yeast at any time during the 7 days of the festival will be cut off from the community of Israel. On the first day of the festival, and again on the 7th day, all the people must gather for a time of special worship. No work of any kind may be done on these days, except in the preparation of food. Celebrate this festival of unleavened bread, for it will remind you that I brought your forces out of the land of Egypt on this very day. This festival will be a permanent regulation for you, to be kept from generation to generation. Only bread without yeast may be eaten from the evening of the 14th day of the month until the evening of the 21st day of the month. During those 7 days there must be no trace of yeast in your homes. Anyone who eats anything made with yeast during this week will be cut off from the community of Israel. These same regulations apply to the foreigners living with you, as if they had been born among you. I repeat, during those days you must not eat anything made with yeast. Wherever you live, eat only bread that has no yeast in it. Then Moses called for the leaders of Israel and said,
Tell each of your families to slaughter the lamb they have set apart for the Passover. Drain each lamb's blood into a basin. Then take a cluster of hyssop branches and dip it into the lamb's blood. Strike the hyssop against the top and sides of the doorframe, staining it with the blood. And remember, no one is allowed to leave the house until morning, for the Lord will pass through the land and strike down the Egyptians. But when he sees the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe, the Lord will pass over your home. He will not permit the destroyer to enter and strike down your firstborn. Remember, these instructions are permanent and must be observed by you and your descendants forever. When you arrive in the land the Lord has promised to give you, you will continue to celebrate this festival. Then your children will ask, What does all this mean? What is this ceremony about? And you will reply, It is the celebration of the Lord's Passover, for he passed over the homes of the Israelites in Egypt.
And though he killed the Egyptians, he spared our families and did not destroy us.
Then all the people bowed their heads and worshipped. So the people of Israel did just as the Lord had commanded through Moses and Aaron, and at midnight the Lord killed all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sat on the throne, to the firstborn son of the captive in the dungeon. Even the firstborn of their livestock were killed. Pharaoh and his officials and all the people of Egypt woke up during the night, and loud wailing was heard throughout the land of Egypt. There was not a single house where someone had not died. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night.
Leave us!
He cried,
Go away, all of you! Go and serve the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds and be gone! Go! But give me a blessing as you leave.
All the Egyptians urged the people of Israel to get out of the land as quickly as possible, for they thought,
We will all die.
The Israelites took with them their bread dough made without yeast. They wrapped their kneading bowls in their spare clothing and carried them on their shoulders. And the people of Israel did as Moses had instructed, and asked the Egyptians for clothing and articles of silver and gold. The Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites, and they gave the Israelites whatever they asked for. So like a victorious army, they plundered the Egyptians. That night the people of Israel left Ramses and started for Succoth. There were about 600,000 men, plus all the women and children, and they were all traveling on foot. Many people who were not Israelites went with them, along with the many flocks and herds. Whenever they stopped to eat, they baked bread from the yeastless dough they had brought from Egypt. It was made without yeast, because the people were rushed out of Egypt and had no time to wait for bread to rise. The people of Israel had lived in Egypt for 430 years. In fact, it was on the last day of the 430th year that all the Lord's forces left the land. This night had been reserved by the Lord to bring his people out from the land of Egypt, so this same night now belongs to him. It must be celebrated every year from generation to generation to remember the Lord's deliverance. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, These are the regulations for the festival of Passover. No foreigners are allowed to eat the Passover lamb, but any slave who has been purchased may eat it if he has been circumcised. Hired servants and visiting foreigners may not eat it. All who eat the lamb must eat it together in one house. You must not carry any of its meat outside, and you may not break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate this festival at the same time. If there are foreigners living among you who want to celebrate the Lord's Passover, let all the males be circumcised. Then they may come and celebrate the Passover with you. They will be treated just as if they had been born among you. But an uncircumcised male may never eat of the Passover lamb. This law applies to everyone, whether a native-born Israelite or a foreigner who has settled among you. So the people of Israel followed all the Lord's instructions to Moses and Aaron. And that very day the Lord began to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt, division by division. Chapter 13. Then the Lord said to Moses, Dedicate to me all the firstborn sons of Israel, and every firstborn male animal. They are mine. So Moses said to the people,
This is a day to remember forever, the day you left Egypt, the place of your slavery. For the Lord has brought you out by his mighty power. Remember, you are not to use any yeast. This day in early spring will be the anniversary of your exodus. You must celebrate this day when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites. This is the land he swore to give your ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey. For 7 days you will eat only bread without yeast. Then on the 7th day, you will celebrate a great feast to the Lord. Eat only bread without yeast during those 7 days. In fact, there must be no yeast in your homes or anywhere within the borders of your land during this time. During these festival days each year, you must explain to your children why you are celebrating. Say to them, This is a celebration of what the Lord did for us when we left Egypt. This annual festival will be a visible reminder to you, like a mark branded on your hands or your forehead. Let it remind you always to keep the Lord's instructions in your minds and on your lips. After all, it was the Lord who rescued you from Egypt with great power. So celebrate this festival at the appointed time each year. And remember these instructions when the Lord brings you into the land he swore to give your ancestors long ago, the land where the Canaanites are now living. All firstborn sons and firstborn male animals must be presented to the Lord. A firstborn male donkey may be redeemed from the Lord by presenting a lamb in its place. But if you decide not to make the exchange, the donkey must be killed by breaking its neck. However, you must redeem every firstborn son. And in the future, your children will ask you, What does all this mean? Then you will tell them, With mighty power the Lord brought us out of Egypt from our slavery. Pharaoh refused to let us go, so the Lord killed all the firstborn males throughout the land of Egypt, both people and animals. That is why we now offer all the firstborn males to the Lord, except that the firstborn sons are always redeemed. Again I say, this ceremony will be like a mark branded on your hands or your forehead. It is a visible reminder that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt with great power.
When Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them on the road that runs through Philistine territory, even though that was the shortest way from Egypt to the Promised Land. God said, If the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led them along a route through the wilderness toward the Red Sea, and the Israelites left Egypt like a marching army. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear that they would take his bones with them when God led them out of Egypt, as he was sure God would. Leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord guided them by a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. That way they could travel whether it was day or night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or pillar of fire from their sight. Chapter 14. Then the Lord gave these instructions to Moses. Tell the people to march toward Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Camp there along the shore opposite Baal-zephon. Then Pharaoh will think, Those Israelites are confused. They are trapped between the wilderness and the sea. And once again I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after you. I have planned this so I will receive great glory at the expense of Pharaoh and his armies. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped there as they were told. When word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites were not planning to return to Egypt after 3 days, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds.
What have we done, letting all these slaves get away?
They asked. So Pharaoh called out his troops and led the chase in his chariot. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with a commander. The Lord continued to strengthen Pharaoh's resolve, and he chased after the people of Israel who had escaped so defiantly. All the forces in Pharaoh's army, all his horses, chariots, and charioteers, were used in the chase. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore near Pi-hahiroth, across from Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh and his army approached, the people of Israel could see them in the distance, marching toward them. The people began to panic, and they cried out to the Lord for help. Then they turned against Moses and complained,
"Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? Why did you make us leave? Didn't we tell you to leave us alone while we were still in Egypt? Our Egyptian slavery was far better than dying out here in the wilderness."
But Moses told the people,
Don't be afraid. Just stand where you are and watch the Lord rescue you. The Egyptians that you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. You won't have to lift a finger in your defense.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. Use your shepherd's staff, hold it out over the water, and a path will open up before you through the sea. Then all the people of Israel will walk through on dry ground. Yet I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will follow the Israelites into the sea. Then I will receive great glory at the expense of Pharaoh and his armies, chariots and charioteers. When I am finished with Pharaoh and his army, all Egypt will know that I am the Lord." Then the angel of God, who had been leading the people of Israel, moved to a position behind them, and the pillar of cloud also moved around behind